So just take a moment to think about why you showed up. And using that reason, try to set a positive intention to use your time well. Now just take a few minutes to just kind of settle your body and your mind here in this room. Be aware of your body sitting here, the pressure against the chair or the cushion, the sounds in the ears, the temperature against the skin. In this way, draw your mind away from the busyness of getting here and the planning for later. Just experience what's happening right now. And as you're ready, just expand your awareness to the other people in the room. To our neighbors. A reminder, we share space. So when we're going over the whole path, we start with looking at, what most beginners are looking for about, how to make this light better, how to make the next light, how to make sure if you have this idea of past and future lives that, you can work towards having a good rebirth with good conditions. And then people who are further along their spiritual path may be interested in getting, if it's possible to get out of cyclic existence with this experience of birth, uncontrolled birth and death. And you might seek how to be liberated from cyclic existence. And then when you figure out, gee, that's really possible, you might want to try to figure out how to bring everyone to that freedom. So you're trying to develop your mind to its fullest potential, full enlightenment. Develop an omniscient mind, a perfected mind, a mind that has no incorrect ideas, a mind that doesn't leave anybody out, that has universal compassion, universal love, and who actually doesn't have to think conceptually at all. but just experiences everything directly, just as it is. So last week we talked, or whatever, a couple of weeks ago, years ago, whatever, we talked about, you know, how you develop compassion, because this last stage of wanting to not just get liberated from the cycle of birth and death, but to actually be able to develop your mind to the point where you can, you know, help others in their suffering. You know, the importance of developing universal compassion, universal love, the importance of developing this heartfelt desire to become completely enlightened for the benefit of others, the bodhicitta mind. So once you've developed that in an uncontrived fashion, where it's just present in your mind 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, that it never, every single state of mind that you have, every thought that you have is under the influence of this desire to want to become enlightened, to help others free themselves from suffering. You know, that's a pretty advanced mind. You know, who are we kidding? You know, that's, you know. So the thing that, you know, helps me, you know, feel like, okay, well, you know, once you're there, the rest of it's pretty easy. Because our biggest problem is getting over ourselves. You know, like, yeah, that sounds good to get everybody else out of suffering, but what about me? I don't want to suffer. You know, so once we can let go of that, once we accept that our happiness is not separate from everybody else's, that there's just no way, you know, without taking care of everyone, we're going to have obstacles, you know, because we put them in front of ourselves all the time. So once you have this uncontrived mind, so it's always present, you know, they describe, then you start working on the bodhisattva, you know, on the perfections, which are like generosity and ethics and patience and joyous effort and concentration and wisdom, and then there are 4 more that they don't even bother to go into at this time of the game. So, really 10 perfections. So, but we can practice these now, you know, just so the idea, if you've heard of taking bodhisattva vows, which there are a bunch, but we take them when we're not a bodhisattva yet, in order to help us. There are ways, it's a practice to help us train our minds to get there. So it's sort of guidelines to, you know, how you want to behave. So you take the bodhisattva vows, and then it's considered you have engaging bodhicitta, which means you're engaged in the activities of a bodhisattva, you know, and then you try to practice the perfection. So that's basically what you're up to when you're a bodhisattva. Okay? The first 4 of the perfection, generosity, ethics, patience, and joyous effort, are what's called skillful means. You know, so it's how we get what we need in order to be able to realize emptiness, you know, and become completely enlightened. So we need, you know, generosity is what's going to give us resources. So the resources, you know, whatever kind of resources we may need to be able to live in the Dharma, for one thing. You know, it's like, for me to live in the Dharma, I need to be able to still eat and all those things, you know. So the more we have resources that are easily available, where, you know, like, so like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you know, really never had to worry about food. So, and he created the cause for that. And so he could be a monk his entire life, you know, and never have to worry about his requisites for living. So that's an advantage. If you want to I'm not going to go into any great detail there. But so the point is that we need resources in order to free us from lots of stuff in order to just exist in samsara, Ethics. We need ethics in order to have this kind of body. Why do we want this kind of body?
It's the only practice. You can only get enlightened, like being a human is the best realm to be in for enlightenment, the only realm.
Well, it's the best one because of, look at all these blank faces. Do you know the answer? Let's go to the person who's just showed up.
Okay, I think, an animal can't, awaken as an animal because they don't have, rationality.
Because their brain is not sufficient.
Yeah, and even the devas, they're too happy, they don't care about awakening.
Right, we have enough suffering.
Right.
Remember this part? Okay. I'm scolding those who've been around a while. So, yeah. So, exactly. So, a human being has a very sophisticated physical support for the mind, which animals do not. Insects have even less. Amoebas even less than that. So you need a pretty good physical support to be able to work with your mind. Then, if you have just nothing but good stuff ripening, like the gods and demigods have, so you can imagine I don't know, who are our equivalents of gods and demigods?
Zeus.
What? Equivalents of that.
Equivalents in
I guess like
here, or in our
Yeah.
society.
Famous
I don't want to say
Famous people.
Celebrities.
People who inherit all kinds of money, and preferably aren't famous. That's probably even better,
Yeah. I almost said, I don't want to say stupid Trump. He thinks he's a god. I almost said it.
But he certainly has had good conditions as an adult. I don't know what his life was like, but it's so. What happens if everything goes your way?
You eventually exhaust all of your positive karma or whatever, and
Or whatever.
yeah, whatever karma
That's
you
a
have,
good way to be firm in your
and
answer.
then you're likely to.
What don't you have the opportunity for?
For suffering.
For
You
suffering.
want to cling to the world even more because it's been so good. It's like, oh, of course, I want
This
to
is
stay.
good enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
why not stay here? I don't see why anybody's complaining. So it's kind of like, so it's just not, we need the conditions that motivate us, but are not so severe, which is why we talk about,
commodities make you accommodate.
okay. Yes. So this is the thing. So we need to not be just stuck in survival mode. So we need a little bit of success, So that's why we talk about a precious human rebirth. It's not just any human rebirth, because not all human rebirths, give you good conditions to practice. So, but we need to be rubbed the wrong way. In order to do what?
To develop virtues or
Anything, any good quality. Good qualities only arise when someone needs something from us. So, who's our best condition for patience?
our enemy.
Our enemy. There's no reason to practice patience if nobody's doing anything that annoys you, or if no one's trying to harm you. But so, okay, so generosity provides resources in the future. Ethics gives you a good rebirth so that you can have conditions to practice. Patience yields companions with whom to practice. Hence why I'm not living in community.
Oh.
I don't have enough patience. So, but this is the thing. So, so this is a recognition, you know, so this is part of this is that these are things that really do help us in our practice. You know, we need resources. We need a particular support for the mind, you know, and then it's nice to have companions, isn't it? And then effort yields achievement. So having the habit of following through, finishing things you start, those things, you know, carry over so that you'll continue to do those things, and that allows you to achieve things. Okay? So these are the skillful means. I don't know why I put this in here. It's important to have a strong force of mind thinking, I can do it. But this must not be mixed with pride or any other disturbing emotion. Moderate effort, a level of effort that is sustainable over a long period of time is important, no matter what we are trying to do. We bring failure on ourselves by working extremely hard at the beginning, attempting to do too much, and then giving it all up after a short time. So you can also burn out in Dharma. They call them 3-day Buddhas at the monastery. You know, people come and they're so keen, and they just, you know, throw themselves in and then give up because they can't sustain the energy that they put forth. So, you know, we need confidence. We don't need afflicted pride. You know, confidence is sort of like unafflicted pride. You know, we do need to, you know, have a sense of self that's strong enough to have some confidence, but that is not being distorted by pride or low self-esteem. And then we need to do the work. But we need to recognize our pace so we don't get ahead of ourselves and burn out. But also so we can recognize when we're being lazy and could do more. So it's kind of a real, you know, we have to have an honest assessment of where we are. Then concentration is the next perfection that we're working on. So perfected concentration is a mind that can stay on its chosen object for as long as one wishes. And this is usually translated as calm abiding, sometimes as serenity. But it's when you can hold your mind, you can choose an object to place your focus on, and nothing can distract you from it, not your body or mind. So your mind, you've got control on your mind, and your body doesn't get in the way. So hunger doesn't arise, aches and pains don't arise. It's called pliancy. It means your body and mind are serviceable. So this is a consequence of calm abiding. It's one of the perks of developing your concentration. And of course, this is the kind of mind we need actually to develop uncontrived bodhicitta. The mind that 24/7 is being influenced by this desire to become enlightened. So this is desirable.
Necessary, right?
It's absolutely necessary, and it's you know, there are methods to achieve it. One method, you know, if you're in the sutra path, you know, they describe how you develop this method of concentration. Like you take 6 months off of everything, have no responsibilities, you know, your food's delivered to you, you're in a safe place, you know, you have, if it's cold, you have coats, you know, whatever. You know, you have everything you need, and then you spend about 18 sessions a day developing calm abiding. So they say if you can do that, if you have perfect conditions, which means you also have like companions, so, you know, like if you're about to freak out or something, you have others that you can, you know, talk to, or your teacher checks in with you from time to time, that you can develop this in 6 months with perfect conditions. You can develop calm abiding. Most of us don't have good conditions, perfect conditions for developing calm abiding, because we have obstacles, and those obstacles, you know, are just simply negative seeds ripening. It's our karma. So and to clean up our act, to be able to get perfect conditions. But we can develop our focus. You know, I don't know if any of y'all meditate regularly, but if you do, then you've seen a change in your ability to sit. You know, some days might not seem like you've made any progress, but most of us, if you've done it for more than, 3 weeks, will start to see that you can in fact settle your mind down. And then if you practice single pointed focus, like following your breath and bringing your mind back to your breath and bringing your mind back to your breath and bringing your mind back to the breath, you will see some progress made there. If you don't practice single pointed concentration, if you don't practice the discipline of telling your mind what to focus on and then holding it there, whether it's your breath or compassion, you won't develop it, because it's a training of discipline for the mind. So all of these things, we've talked about, the two wings of the bird to get to complete enlightenment, of compassion and wisdom, method and wisdom. And so most of these things that we've been talking about so far are all about method, that you need concentration in order to develop the mind of bodhicitta, the truth is you need a lot of concentration to develop just plain old renunciation. What's plain old renunciation?
Giving up on samsara.
Yes, the saying, this isn't good enough. I'm tired of this uncontrolled birth, death stuff. Let's get out. We have to remember that in every moment so that you're not seduced by the chocolate bar, thinking, oh yes, there's everlasting happiness here. So that you can always remember it's just in the nature of suffering, and you don't get distracted by it. Obviously, it's usually not a candy bar, but it's things like success, money, all those things that can just, we think, oh, I'll be happy when. Well, that actually, if you want lasting happiness, there is no when in samsara. The best you're going to get is pretty good stuff until you die. And then you get separated from all that stuff and have to start all over. But to develop compassion, we need some concentration. To develop, unconditional love, we need some concentration. So all of these things, remembering to be generous, all of that takes a certain mindfulness. Remembering what are virtues and non-virtues, so you're not creating the cause to have a lower realm rebirth. That takes a certain amount of concentration. Remembering. You have to have mindfulness and alertness to keep yourself on track. But finally, if you want to get out, you need wisdom. So wisdom is about, specifically in this context, the wisdom that understands how things actually exist, not the way they appear to us to exist. But you also need concentration for
to get that in the first
Yes.
place.
because you have to hold the object. So with the single pointed concentration of calm abiding, which takes emptiness as its object, special insight arises that is the cause of the mind realizing the way things exist, and the wisdom knowing how to help sentient beings. This can also occur through the practice of tantra. This is the sutra presentation, and then there's also the Vajrayana presentation. So tantra is basically a technique to be able to develop calm abiding, emptiness and special insight all at the same time. So it's a very powerful practice if you have all the causes and conditions ripen. It's not, again, it doesn't work if you don't have the conditions for it to work. So that's why they say you really need a strong grounding in the Lam Rim, in the Sutra path, in order to be able to succeed with Tantra. So, So this is all about, I mean, the main focus within this category of how things actually exist is how we exist, how the self exists, how the I exist. Because our ignorance of how the I exist is the foundation of all our disturbing states of mind. They all arise from this misunderstanding of how we exist. So we really need to meditate on, reflect on, notice, become more and more aware of how we view the I, so that we can understand where we're going, what the mistake is. That there is a misunderstanding of how the I exists. So we view the I, according to this is just the teachings, you have to examine this a lot further to have a real understanding of this, as inherently existent, as if it were independent of the aggregates of body and mind. The I appears to be substantially established, existent in its own right, and this mode of existence does not appear to be imposed by our own mental projection. Have enough jargon for you? Nothing but jargon here. Okay. So imagine you see different people walking towards you, but you can't yet tell if one of them is your friend. So what do? You start to scan the parts of the people, the gender, the height, the color, and the length of hair, and when they get close enough, you're looking at their faces until you find the part that is suitable to be the basis of the designation friend. So we look at the basis, and then we label. We already have a label for friend. We've already created that label. So now we're trying to find the parts for the label. Okay. The parts and the label are not the same. The label refers to the parts. The label is permanent in a way. It's like a name. It's just, like friend. That we have a category called friend, and there are certain people that, fall into that category. But those certain people, the basis of designation for the word friend, for the label friend, are constantly changing. Okay? So even if you have a friend that's been a friend for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you never change the label friend, but that friend, the basis of designation for friend, has been constantly changing. So imagine you're looking at a river. What are the parts that you label with the name river?
The water.
Mm-hmm. Water. Water's one. What else?
The banks.
The banks. It sort of defines the river, right?
The current.
The current.
The earth beneath it.
The earth beneath, the whole little,
Fish.
the surrounding, the fish that live in the river.
Placement relative to the surroundings, right?
Right. Now, what do these parts depend on?
They all depend on each other.
And lots of other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So, okay. Can you point to the same river twice?
The water's constantly flowing, it's different water.
No, because it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't. Can you point to the same me twice?
Not really.
No. It's not a not really.
No.
It's a no.
It's no.
This is the way we need to reflect on this. So we need to separate these permanent sounding labels from what's actually there, which is something that's constantly changing. So just like a river is moving, that's why you pick a river. You don't pick a still lake. Because that will fool you. Because it's constantly changing too. But it's, the river is obviously changing if you allow your mind to think about it. And that's what we've got to do, is start to recognize that these things we hold as somehow static aren't. Yeah.
So like you think about these things in order to realize that they're not they're not self-existent, because they depend on everything else depends on itself. So they don't have like an essence, or like we don't have an Atman. You know, we're not the same
Yeah.
thing.
We don't
But-
have a permanent self.
But then so it's Anatman, but it's like there is that consciousness. When 90 years old, it's gonna be like I'm, you know.
But will
So-
it be the same consciousness when you were 2?
It won't be, but what it that I feel like, you know, it's still there. Like, what is that?
Well, you could still call it my consciousness because that label hadn't changed.
Right.
The basis of designation is constantly changing, but it's still identifiable.
But what is that? That is that, you know, so in, like Buddhism, it's Anatman. There is no self.
There's no
soul.
permanent self.
Right. So at the end, so what is that thing when I'm 90?
It's a
That moves
it's
on to
like-
the next life.
That's right. It's just a moment of consciousness.
It just, okay.
That's all it is.
Right.
It's just a moment. And
My
now
po-
it's another moment.
my
And
po-
now it's yet another moment.
My point being is that the Anatman seems to be like the Atman, just kind of turned differently.
Yeah, but what is different, you see, this is where our intellect and our understanding the consequences of our reasoning, we really have to bring together. You know, we need to understand that, you know, because intellectually, this is really easy. Intellectually, you know, we don't have a big deal knowing, oh yeah, the river changes constantly, you know. Name river doesn't change, but I mean, it might change when, you know, somebody else comes and says, oh, we're not calling it the Robert E. Lee River, we're going to call it something else now. You know, so we do change names, but not even the idea, you know, so we have this river, right? Well, but we hold that river to exist in a way that our intellect even knows it does not. We hold it to exist as if there's some sort of essence of that river that's always there. In every moment of the river, it's there.
Sorry.
Just hold up. So this is where we start to superimpose on top of how things look to us, meaning that is referenceless. It's just, we just make it up. We create stories about things. We impute things on top of it that don't exist. It's very hard for us to understand that even a river, which is very tangible, only exists as a river because of name and conception. There's no inherent riverness there. This is where it gets hard. We're so accustomed to this process of recognizing something, labeling it, and then grasping after it as if it is that label. It's very difficult to stop doing it. So we have this idea that, I'm sorry, my 90-year-old mind has something that's shared with my just born mind.
I can clarify what I was asking better.
Okay.
In that, what is the difference? So, in Buddhism, that you know Atman, but you know it's the concept of Buddha nature. You're the Buddha nature, the Buddha embryo. You know that seed.
There isn't a thing.
Well, you know we have.
Buddha nature is the absence of inherent existence. It is the no self.
But it's also it's not being either, right? So what I'm saying is, I feel that Atman and Buddha nature or Buddha mind is just the same concept as
No, it's not.
Brahma.
They're opposites.
Right, I'm at.
So, Buddha potential is our emptiness.
But it doesn't mean void, right?
No, it means all those things we were just talking about. It doesn't exist inherently. We don't exist inherently. We are not the label.
That's very liberating when you think of
It's
it.
very liberating.
Like today, I was thinking how I label my son as my son. You know, he's just my, and I still, and he's now a man. And the fact that I have to recognize the change, is really hard to grasp that concept, because I just still see him a certain way and label
That's
him.
the ignorance.
That's
The
the
ignorance
ignorance.
really holds on to these labels as if somehow they're coming from the side of the object. You know, that once that son is born, it's there. We've created a son. And what the Buddha said is actually, if you reflect long enough, you'll realize you're projecting son onto this particular set of parts that are constantly changing. And if you tried to find your son in any of those parts, you wouldn't be able to do it. You can't even find it in the collection of parts. It doesn't mean there's no basis of designation for the name my son. It just means that the meaning we impute on top of that name is coming from us, not the object.
You don't want it to change. I mean, if there's things you don't want to change, you
But
just.
there's all sorts of stuff we impute onto it. Like, he's always been my son. That the consciousness that's in my son has always been my son. According to the Buddha, that's just this particular life. But in fact, he's been your mother in past lives. He's been your enemy.
That's a good way for me, as far as,
In the future-
allowing change to happen, being more open to.
This is the actual reality of how things exist, is that everything's a dependent arising, which means, what does dependent arising mean? What does that phrase mean to you?
Something arises independence upon either another component or a previous event. So,
Okay, on causes and conditions.
Causes and
Coming
effects.
Then it's dependent. It's not independent. It just doesn't just come into being like Star Trek or something beams you somewhere or something, But even if you were beamed somewhere, there were causes and conditions that allowed that. Like you have to stand on that transporter thingy and freak out like Captain McCoy or Dr. McCoy or whatever his name was. So, and what is the consequence of saying something is dependent? It's a dependent arising from causes and conditions.
That it's permanent.
it can't exist on its own.
It can't exist on its own. Can it exist if one of those causes or conditions is missing?
Sure, in a different way.
Then it's not it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you mean like it as in the specific object, and no. And then it becomes something else.
You have to really look at that.
How we
The only reason you can label this child my son is because it came from your womb, or you adopted it, And that only happened in this life. So if you didn't have sex that night and have that fertilized egg, would it be your, this son? That would be a different person. We have to understand that everything is like this. That it's literally, causes and conditions coming together and something arising from that. And if any of them are missing, it's not going to be the same object. Might be similar, but it's not going to be the same. And then in every moment, those causes and conditions have to come together for the next moment. And the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment, and then they don't. I was reading Pema Chodron today, and she was talking about Joan Didion, the writer Joan Didion, and her husband died suddenly. So she comes home from the hospital where their daughter is in a coma. She comes home, she starts to fix dinner, having a conversation with her husband, and then he stops talking. Because he's dead. Because the causes and conditions for him to take another breath stopped. They weren't present. That's all it takes.
And then her daughter died.
Yeah, she had a great life. You know, she called it the Year of Magical Thinking in her book about it. But she said she apparently wrote in that moment, her husband died. She had written on her computer. She didn't look at her computer for months, but she wrote it. But when she opened it, she discovered she wrote, "Life changes fast. Life changes in the instant. You sit down to dinner, and life as you know it ends."
She was writing that when it happened?
Right after it
Oh,
happened.
right after.
And then she didn't look at her computer for a long, long time.
So there's no beginning and no end as far as,
Anything.
so is there a circle?
There's just no beginning, no end. Isn't that creepy?
There's a circle.
I think a beginning's
That's
also
you're trying
creepy.
to make it
I'm just
in a way that we
wondering-
understand it.
Yeah, I'm
That's-
just
that's-
wondering, because sometimes I see it as a circle.
I think, you know, the
Okay.
first
Samsara's a circle.
I realize it as a circle.
thing when Venerable Tendron told me there was no beginning, no end, I said, all right, I'll just stop thinking about origination. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's just not worth thinking. I mean,
You can't.
yeah.
I mean, that's what it's saying. There is no beginning.
There's no beginning.
And consciousness, every one of our consciousnesses has always existed.
So is the end enlightenment?
No, it doesn't
No.
end. It just means your ignorance has ended.
Out of samsara, and then you won't be, have to be reborn into samsara again, or into.
Samsara won't exist for you. Samsara is a manifestation of our habits and past actions. Yeah,
So is consciousness shared, or is it particular?
it's
through that
particular to a
one being's
continuum.
Lives.
My consciousness and your consciousness are not the same.
Okay. But they've always been there.
They've always been there, and they will always be there. Because it doesn't end. Consciousness doesn't end. What ends are wrong conceptions. Ignorance ends. Because if once you quit thinking incorrectly, then it's finished. It's like the rope and the snake. As soon as you know that coiled thing over there in the corner is a rope and not a snake, you don't go back to thinking it's a snake. It's just a rope, because now you know how it actually exists. So what ends is the misconception. What ends is discrimination, bias, all of those things. Those things end because they're all based on a misconception, which is ignorance. Because we think things exist in some sort of, that's my consciousness. And that my has meaning to us, doesn't it? My is Tendron's my. I have a name for it. I know how long it's existed, when it's Tendron. Then before that it was Leslie. It's Leslie's mind. We think we own it, and that the owner is somehow separate from that body and mind. Because that's one of the big keys here. Is all the jargon. Friggin' jargon. So, we think that there is a self that exists independently of our body and mind. It is the owner of this body and mind. The controller of the body and mind. The body and mind changes, ages, learns new things, forgets other things, but there is a self that we label I that we think doesn't change from birth to death. And that's not true. That's the I we want to recognize doesn't exist, never existed, and is actually harming us. The clinging to it as if it exists is where our disturbing emotions arise. Yep.
But a Buddha consciousness, like a Buddha, it sees past all of it.
It doesn't see past anything, it just experiences everything all at once.
Right, but so that doesn't, like, it doesn't not exist, like emptiness.
No,
For
I
me
didn't say that. It
no.
never ends. An enlightened mind never ends. It just never goes back to being an unenlightened mind.
And there's only one Buddha, primordial Buddha. Is there a ground?
No.
So that's why
There's no beginning.
no one.
There's no somebody who just started that way. All Buddhas start just like we do, stuck in ignorance.
And the wisdom's less conceptual, and it's more with the practice of concentration.
It's not less conceptual. A Buddha mind experiences everything directly. There's no concept involved. Buddha mind pervades everything because it's not stuck in some samsaric little body. So these are the concepts. So, there's a lot to think about. It's not little. Yeah.
So, would you say it's possible that actually our minds are also kind of everywhere, like
No,
why?
because your mind is grasping at an inherently existent,
I know, but I was going to follow that with,
Okay.
except for
except
the obscurations that exist to make us appear to be localized at this particular point in time.
yeah, you can look at it that way, I think.
So,
Okay, so the point is, yes, as soon as you become enlightened,
right.
you are now aware of everything directly, all at once, in every moment.
As it truly is. Right.
No, you're just experiencing it directly, just like you taste water. It's a direct experience. It's not a conceptual experience. Now, lightning lit, pleasant, well, that's all conceptual. Okay, so
Okay.
as soon as when you're liberated, which is before you become fully enlightened, when you're liberated from this uncontrolled birth and death, you no longer will have any negative states of mind arise because they arise from ignorance. Okay. What you still have are the habits that have been imprinted on your mind. So what they say, their analogy is, it's like, a bag that was full of garlic. There's still the smell of the garlic, even though there's no garlic there. And so that's what between liberation and enlightenment, that's what you have to remove, are those tendencies that arise from just the long-term habit of ignorance. And so and when you finally remove that last imprint, as they say, then you're able to know, you're no longer prevented from omniscience.
So when Buddha was in a body,
Buddha was in a body.
Buddha was his body,
He emanated a body, yes.
emanated a body. At what point did he become enlightened?
Of course, this depends on which story you go by. The Theravadins say he became enlightened in this life, his historical body, so he was not enlightened, and he became enlightened from sitting under the Bodhi tree, and became enlightened, okay? The Mahayana view is that he was already enlightened, and he manifested this super emanation body for our sake to teach us the Dharma. Okay. So, but regardless, the point is that when you become enlightened, it's a big view. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Long before that, as soon as you become a bodhisattva, on the path of seeing, I believe, you can start emanating bodies. So you're not by yourself anymore helping others. You can emanate help. So I think it's 100 bodies in the first ground, you know. It's 1,000 on the second ground, you know. It exponentially grows, 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 grows. So at the moment that a bodhisattva, an unenlightened bodhisattva, has lots of bodies out there helping others, right? And at the moment it becomes enlightened, all of them, all those emanations are enlightened. At the same time, this doesn't have to, because like you said, the mind is everywhere. So once those obstacles to omniscience are removed, then there's no blinders on. Okay?
And it's not like you have to go somewhere.
No, you don't
It's just
have to. Buddhas
are
never go
wherever you
anywhere.
are. You are.
Buddhas never get up out of meditation because it is not about the body.
And
The body ceases to be in any way what we, you know, associate with a body. There is no body like that. When you're liberated, there's no longer this body. You're out of samsara. Emanations are actually the nature of light. We just can't tell because we're not liberated.
Shakyamuni's body, the historical Buddha, was a, what is the Nirvana?
It's a super
Kaya?
emanation.
What's it called?
Nirmakana. It's a special kind of Rupakaya, which is a form body,
There's three
called a
bodies,
Nirmana.
right?
No, other four
Oh, okay.
or three. Just depends.
Depending.
I can't cover the whole
Right,
thing
right. I know.
tonight, so you'll have to chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
But the it's a super emanation body, which is called the Nirmanakaya. You know, so what's special about a super emanation body is that he is actually generating a human body, because only a human body can become a monk. So, but in the moment of, you know, so all the bodies of a Buddha, you know, all the emanation bodies of a Bodhisattva are immediately, you know, are simultaneously enlightened when, you know, I mean, it's just, see, the words don't really describe this very well because we can't relate to it.
So if you can like separate your knowing that your mind is just, you know, taking up residence in this body, then that is really not your true self. That is not what you would, is your.
You're still grasping
you
at
don't
the
have-
self there, aren't you?
True self.
You
My
don't-
true self.
You don't have a self.
You don't have a true
You
self.
don't have a self. So once
You have a self.
but it's not.
Because a self is just a
It's just-
name, a label given to your body and mind. A Buddha has a body and mind. The body is just a very, very, very subtle energy.
Right.
There's always a physical, you know, body and mind are inseparable. Ours is really gross in more ways than one.
So you let go of the attachment to that.
You let go of all
self.
sorts of things. You actually have to penetrate our ignorance of grasping at an inherently existent self of yourself, as well as everything else, as well as the cup. You know, it's like Demonstrate from this book said today, she goes, oh, it was really quite a shock to realize that, you know, when you realize emptiness, you're on the first ground of a Buddha, and there are 9 more. So, you know, so it's like, you know, Buddhahood is, you know, perfecting wisdom takes a while. You know, so it's not, I mean, you know, so you're on the path of seeing, and then that very next moment, so you're on the path of seeing, and you see. So now you're on the path of meditation, but you're in the first bodhisattva bhumi, the first ground, you know. So there are 10 of those. So it's a process.
It is.
But in that, you know, so, and you're not liberated until the 8th ground.
The 8th realization of emptiness.
You're not liberated from samsara until, now you're liberated from uncontrolled birth and death, because now you have control. But you're still stuck in samsara. This is how powerful, when you think about what is the cause of samsara, it's the mind. This is how powerful our mind is. So changing our habits of mind takes a lot of effort and practice and good conditions and removing obstacles. So this is why they say you have to accumulate lots of merit to remove those obstacles to wisdom. You know? So think about it this way. If you've decided you understand this, what can that be an obstacle to?
Not learning more.
Yeah. If you understand this, you probably aren't going to be sitting here. You know? So we have to really understand what it means to say penetrating this ignorance. It's not just intellectual understanding. That's where it starts. But the difference between the path of preparation, when you've got calm abiding, you're meditating on emptiness, and the path of seeing is a moment where you directly experience emptiness, how things exist. In other words, nothing arises to that mind. Because you're looking for inherent existence, and nothing exists that way.
The Tantra helps us get past that conceptualization to get us faster or closer to that action.
Not really.
No?
No, it's more sophisticated than that. It's like you already have to have a pretty good understanding of emptiness in order to practice Tantra well. Because if you don't have that,
It does nothing.
well, I mean, it's just, in fact, it can be dangerous. But it's just, because it is the understanding of emptiness that allows the practice of Tantra. It's what removes the obstacles to being able to practice Tantra and not have it be just a game. Yeah.
You keep saying obstacles. What are some common obstacles? Like, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so one obvious obstacle is if you don't meet the teachings. So what can be a cause for not meeting the teachings?
Not following their,
Abandoning teachers.
Abandoning teachers.
not following their, what they asked you to do.
Yeah. Going, I know, I heard him, but I never did it. Those kind of things. Ignoring the advice of teachers in past lives can cause you not to meet a teacher in this life.
Breaking your commitments, vows.
Then you do meet the teachings, and you take some vows, and then you don't keep them. So what's an obstacle to resources? Miserliness. Not being generous. So you got resources, but you don't share. What's a way to get good resources, but not Dharma resources?
Generosity.
Yeah, with poor motivation.
Tax reduction.
The tax reduction, or to look good,
Right.
This is why, anonymous donations are encouraged, because it kind of separates, it helps you counter pride. At least not having an audience know. So those are the ways, so it's sort of like, you try to accumulate lots of positive actions, lots of positive seeds on your mind stream that will ripen in positive ways in order to remove obstacles. So pride is one of them. When you think, oh yeah, I get it. So then you quit listening. You quit reflecting. So that becomes an obstacle to you actually being able to have a realization. So instead, you just, you become very scholarly, but you actually don't, have any real experiences of the Dharma. If you get attached to the experience of peace in your meditation, that can become an obstacle. Because then you're just doing it because it feels good. And that is not the purpose of meditation.
Yeah.
Or just that, this is nice.
Right.
Or it lowers my blood pressure.
Right, it lowers. But that's all right. It's just But it's the attachment. If we then go, the reason I meditate is because I feel good while I meditate, you're not using meditation for what it's for. I mean, its purpose is to become more aware. And what do you want to become more aware of? Your ignorance.
Your habits, your mind.
Your unskillful habits.
Venerable Tendron, can that present an obstacle too, if in that you create this expectation that it should always go well? Or
Yeah. But of course, you can, if that's your goal, because, like, think about it this way. If you're not trying to work on your mind when you meditate, all you try to develop is single-pointed concentration. Because that way you keep your mind from being distracted to all your worries, all your, problems, whatever, And so you experience just a state of peace because you're not letting your mind go anywhere that you don't want to go. That's, if you develop that, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to have that state most days. The trouble is if what can happen is you get attached to that and you keep reaching these higher and higher levels of concentration, which is not literally physical. These are minds. It's so hard not to get into the tangible. We're talking about a non-physical thing, the mind. So you develop your concentration to more and more subtle levels of concentration. And each one is more peaceful than the last. If you have no spiritual motivation, if you're not meditating for the purpose to become enlightened to benefit others, you just keep, this is nice. This is what we want in liberation, right? We just, wouldn't it be nice to have no suffering at all? This can create the cause to be born in the form and formless realms, which are states of concentration. And you can't do anything. You're just in a state of, and people can mistake that state, like in the formless realm, as if they're liberated, and then they die. And go, it must not be possible. And so then you're turned away from even meditation. And so, because you get reborn.
That's interesting. I've never heard you talk about that. That is very interesting.
Well, he thought of it because we've talked about it before. It's in it's in the emptiness class, or maybe it's in the, I don't know. It's in one of those classes. But yeah, but it's a particular state. But in ordinary samsara, where you're just developing your ability to stay calm, you can do that. It's pretty easy to get to the fourth level of concentration, which is sort of continuous placement. But it's, so that's why in our tradition, they harp on, don't do this just because it feels good for you. But that won't get you very far. Because you're just going to die and then, reborn and then, and samsara is the nature of suffering. So if you really want to end suffering, you have to do more than that. It's like, you have to do more than take drugs that just numb the pain. So, yeah.
The historical Buddha, according to all the stories, did go through the process of aging and death.
Right.
So how are we to understand that?
Well, part of that is, because he manifested as a human. And so the human body's impermanent. But it's also to model.
Right.
So that they say a super emanation goes all the 12 deeds of a Buddha in order to show us, the process. Yeah. Now, in the Theravadan tradition, it's said that when you die, when you become enlightened, at the end of that life, you cease. Yeah.
This is something you said earlier. You said that an enlightened mind can never go back to being unenlightened. Is that also true for an unenlightened mind? Can we regress or?
Yeah, we do all the time.
Okay.
We can. Depends on what we practice. So this is why we want pretty good conditions, not perfect conditions, but pretty good conditions, because then that gives us something to work with, But if, like, say, our next life, we get born in a war-torn country or something, then we may have to kill the rest of our lives, and then we're practicing killing, and practicing guarding ourselves from the enemy or whatever, just making this up, but that would cause you to be, have another terrible rebirth because of all that killing, and then you have, and so it's a process before you exhaust all that stuff and then have one of your virtues ripen, and then you get back to having a human rebirth with pretty good conditions and da 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 da. So yeah, we just kind of, what the teachings say is that we've done it all except gotten out. So we've developed calm abiding, we've done all these things, we just haven't actually done enough to realize emptiness and get out. We haven't accumulated enough merit, all those things. So, because it's like this, I mean, you can imagine, so like you picture the people that you think, are sort of like the God realms, but as humans. Well, they've got their generosity karma ripening, they have lots of resources. If they're very attractive or considered attractive by this particular society, that's a result of patience. So they've got all these different things ripening for them, but they don't meet the teachings in this life, or they just kind of waste all those good resources, and they don't learn much in this life. Not everybody, but I mean that's a real possibility, and so they just kind of. And say maybe they're not generous in this life, even though they've got all these resources. I mean, I get the impression that Steve Jobs wasn't particularly generous. That could be I could just be making that up.
About Richard Gere.
But Richard Gere met the teachings. He supports His Holiness's efforts. He's like Institute Lama Tsongkhapa benefits from him because he helps support, he's the one who brought Genda Dripa there, so, but that's, so there you go. I mean, it's one of those things. So we want to work on, one of the reasons you're not supposed to disparage any images of Buddhas, when you take refuge, that's one of the commitments, is that you never disrespect representations of the three jewels, It's not that they're the three jewels. That's not the, it's this mind. We want to not disrespect it because we want to be attracted to these representations in the future. And we want to, be attracted to them with respect. And that helps create the cause of meeting teachers. So this happens to be what it is in this current time, but, So everything's about trying to pull us towards, actions that will help us reduce our suffering. But if we're just continually drawn to just those things that feed our addictions to pleasure, then, we don't make very much progress. So.
So it's kind of like, looking out for ourselves and trying to get good stuff for ourselves so eventually we can help everyone else. But at the beginning it's like, okay, I need to accumulate good merit so I can get to the good conditions in the next life.
This is why you really want to train your mind to always be thinking in terms of that long view. You don't think in terms of next life. You think in terms of, so I can have a succession of good rebirths so I can become enlightened in the future to benefit all sentient beings. It's just a mind training, to try to think that way. So the more we can do that, the more we can just practice with our mind that I'm doing, and, people who are really good at this, do it with everything. So then they take a shower. They're doing it, in order to become enlightened in the future. It's about training the mind to constantly be thinking of what can I do in this moment that will help me get there. And so the other is true too. It's sometimes helpful to ask yourself, will this help me get enlightened? When you're trying to decide whether to do something or not. So it's always, it's in that, when in doubt, don't. There's simple ways to follow it, but the reason why we can, have an enlightened mind is because our minds are empty of existing in any kind of fixed, static way. So it's changeable. So we can correct our wrong states of mind or incorrect states of mind. And once we correct them, they won't arise again. So that just takes a lot of effort. But it doesn't take a lot of effort continuously. It's like because it takes effort to get on that first path, which is the path of accumulation. And you're accumulating merit in order to remove the obstacles so that you can come abiding on emptiness, so that special insight can arise and you'll actually have that realization of emptiness, and then you're on the path of seeing. So the names, they don't use these, they don't kind of go like, oh, this is the, path of diamonds or something. No, it's, the path of accumulation. What are you doing? You're accumulating merit. Then there's the path of preparation. What are you doing? You're preparing your mind to realize emptiness, and then you get there. So what is that? That's the path of seeing, because you're seeing things as they actually are. And then what do you have to do? You have to reflect on that a lot. So you're on the path of meditation. These are all minds. That's all it's referring to. So you have the mind that's trying to accumulate merits in order to have the resources you need in order to become enlightened. And then you have the mind that's actually preparing the mind. And they have all these, so that it's, there's nothing woo-woo about the names. It's very direct. It describes what's going on. So, because the good news is the Buddha said that the reason we're stuck in samsara is because just of a fundamental confusion. We have it wrong about how we exist. We think we're all separate here. We think, that there's something that we can hold on to that is us. And so when it's bad, we hold on to that. Oh, I'm just a greedy, angry person, and I can't change that. Sorry, you just have to put up with that. And then when we do something right, then we think, oh, it's just so wonderful. Everybody should love me, We don't notice how momentary that is. But we still, we grab onto these natures and we think everything is like that. So that's why it's so, these experiences where someone just, experiences the death of a loved one in that moment, like literally, they're not in the hospital, they're just sitting there, having a conversation with you, and then they're not. But that consciousness goes to some next body, because it isn't your partner.
When we see the same habit of ourselves, like at age 5 and 20 and 30, is this, and that, is the sense of I through that, is that because we keep creating the same causes and conditions of that?
We're practicing it. Every moment that we're angry, we're practicing anger. And that just becomes, so then, we meet the similar conditions or whatever, and then anger arises because we've been practicing it. So that's why it matters how we think, and try to start to notice. This is the purpose of meditation, is become aware of what's going on, in the mind. So that then you can kind of go, oh, I seem to have this habit. Just judging others, and being reactive, and blah, blah, blah. And then we can change it. Because the mind is not stuck. It's not static. It's not a certain way. There is no nature that is, oh, well, Tendron's just like that. That doesn't exist. Every moment is a fresh start. But we have to put some effort into it for that to happen. We have to notice.
It almost seems like it's a way to differentiate ourselves. Like, oh, I'm not the type. I don't really get angry. I get more sad, or like it becomes an intensity of course.
And we're just we grasp onto it as if somehow it's fixed, and that's what's not true at all. It's literally we're just a series of moments, and the only moment is already passed. And you can't grab it and go, that's me. Yeah.
Just got a hypothetical question, I guess. So, for more severe things, like say not being sad or angry, but what about like people that are like that constantly commit crimes, like serial killers or something?
Right.
Maybe
They've
the
been-
same can be said for them, like, oh,
Yes.
they're not crazy murderers, they're just.
They've just practiced a mind, you know, again and again and again, that comes to the conclusion that the only way to get what they want is to kill someone. You know, and they might actually experience pleasure from that, you know, because they've got such a distorted habit of mind through lifetimes. You know, it probably didn't happen just in one life. You know, they had good conditions in this life to start manifesting this behavior, but they've been practicing. You know, so it's whatever distortion they've got in their mind. You know, Hitler, you know, had this distortion in his mind that you could, you know, blame, you know, that if we just got rid of this group of people who believed in this certain way or who were attracted to these people or, you know, whatever the thing was, if we just get rid of them, everything will be fine. Well, that took a lot of practice. But if you're judgmental in this life, that's a Hitler mind in the future. You know, if you're constantly going, oh, they're like that, you know, pigeonholing people and putting them in some sort of permanent little group of them, you know, that's the kind of mind that leads to that kind of hatred of other. And it's dangerous. But it starts with the, you know, it's not like a serial killer is something special. No. And the same kind of mind we do. They've just been practicing really incorrect states of mind. No.
Accumulation of bad merit.
Well, every moment of mind places imprints on your mind stream, you know, and those and places seeds that will ripen in the future as either a positive or negative experience. So every moment, but it, you know, this is why they use the word imprint, because it's such a good, you know, it conjures up such a good imprint, you know, image, you know, but that imprint. So every time you do it, it just gets deeper and deeper. It's like you're, you know, running grooves in your brain or something. But but it isn't physical. It's just habits and tendencies. So they just go from life to life, and whatever you've been practicing is what's likely to arise. You know, this is why we have to interrupt it. This is why when we feel like, oh yeah, but it's just right there, you know, I can't do anything about it. I'm not even thinking about it, you know, but I'm angry, you know, and it's just that you practice it so well that, you know, it just arises without any effort at all. Well, when you correct these mistaken ways of thinking and make those other ways of thinking habitual, they too will arise without it. That's why they say a Buddha's, you know, enlightened activities arise spontaneously and effortlessly, because it's a habit. That's all. It's very simple. It's just positive habits and wisdom. The removal of ignorance, you know, just opens up everything. But the habit of thinking that happiness somehow is about controlling external things. I mean, that's the mistake of, you know, killing someone thinking that's going to get your way. You know, we just kill all the enemies, you know. And of course, we just create new enemies, but, you know. But it's just that, you know, it's this a misunderstanding how we actually exist. That somehow, you know, the people that exist now are, you know, are the only people that I have to worry about, because this is, you know, so if you only believe in one life, you know, it's a very limited idea. But you can still improve your experience in this life, you know, by just looking at your mind and see how you think, because that's where so much of our suffering, even in the moment, arises, because we make ourselves suffer, because we make ourselves crazy with the way we think. Get all hooked by, oh, I can get what I want, and on it goes. But once we this is why you have to, it's more than just intellectually understanding it. You have to reflect on these things, and this is why you alternate between analytical meditation and single-pointed meditation. So your analytical just means you're reflecting on it. You're looking at the logic. You're thinking about it. And then you might have an experience of understanding it in a new way. That's how I felt today when I was reading this thing about Job, and this idea that, that, oh yeah, life has ended as we know it. That's emptiness. That's how that can happen. It's because everything is empty every moment. It's just whether the causes and conditions are there. Everything's just a dependent arising. So it's just, so when you have that, you just rest there for a moment. You quit thinking, analyzing. You get familiar with that experience, so that because that's how we grow our inner wisdom.
So like being in the moment.
It's more than that. It's recognizing there's been a shift.
Aha moment.
Yeah, it's an aha moment. They say is the we're having a break. All right. So really understand, they say, what do they say? So this is some of the jargon. The self is empty of independence. It's empty of existing separate from its parts. It's empty of a permanent nature. It's empty of being static. It's empty of existing from its own side. It's empty of existing without being labeled by language and conception. It's empty of existing inherently. And they say the best reason for this, the king of reasons, is it's empty of existing inherently because it's a dependent arising. So those two things are true of everything that exists. Everything that exists is empty, so it's a dependent arising. So really understanding what it means to say something is a dependent arising, that it's not independent. So this is why my happiness is dependent upon other sentient beings. Because it's a dependent arising. It's not, we're interconnected. We're not separate. It appears that we are separate, but that's only because we have very limited eyeballs. We wouldn't appear separate if we had a different kind of eyeball that could see all this stuff that's going on and see how when we do this, the stuff moves. Yeah.
Is emptiness itself a dependent arising, or is it a quality?
It's an
like
absence of something.
It's an absence of something.
And it's always of something. So emptiness doesn't exist separate on its own out there somewhere. It's not a thing. It's an absence of a thing. So everything that exists is empty of existing inherently. So it's an absence of something.
Okay.
So
Now
it's
I kind of understand, I think, what you were getting at before, because it seems like it's a thing.
Yes. Yeah, and we have to be careful of that. It's hard to, that's why it's empty of something. It's,
Right.
And the emptiness of me only exists when me exists.
But it seems like it's a permanent quality.
It is a permanent aspect
It's a permanent aspect.
because
of
it's an
phenomena,
absence.
Of all phenomena.
Yeah, but even on an individual, because unlike the aspect of emptiness doesn't change because it's an absence. So it's like really hard to get your head around it all.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
the emptiness of the cup exists in every moment of the cup
Right.
existence, and that's changing every moment. It's like arising in
Okay.
every moment, the cup. Okay, so the emptiness of the cup arises in every moment, so to speak, because it's a quality of the cup. But emptiness of cup only exists when cup exists.
Right.
Okay? It's considered permanent because it doesn't change. It's not like this moment of cup, which gives rise to the next moment of cup. That this moment of emptiness of the cup gives rise to the emptiness of the next. It's not like that. It's just that this cup is empty, the next moment of cup is empty, the next moment of cup is empty. They all are absence of inherent existence. Existing. Whatever.
Emptiness
know?
is permanent.
I guess.
Is emptiness permanent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's-
But the point of that is, it's because it's an absence of something. So it's not something out here somewhere.
Right.
In other
No.
words, when the cup is destroyed,
Even when the cup's not destroyed, the emptiness of the cup only exists in every moment of the cup.
right. Okay, I see what you mean.
So the moments in between that we can't see because of persistence of vision, you know, there's no emptiness there either. It,
So
it gives me a headache to just try to communicate this.
it's permanent and changing at the same time,
Mm-mm.
no?
Emptiness doesn't change, that's why it's permanent. Impermanent means momentary.
Okay.
I know, it's this part is really hard to get at. Because we can't see it happening. We can see gross impermanence. You know, we can see when the cup's destroyed. But that cup is actually doesn't exist beyond a moment. It's changing constantly. And every moment of cup, there's an emptiness of cup. Every moment in between cup, there's no emptiness of cup. Yep.
So our self is impermanent, right?
Yep.
But our emptiness of self is permanent?
It's not separate. Every moment of self, that self is empty of inherent existence. But it's an absence of something. Nothing's producing that. We don't produce an absence. It just isn't there.
Oh, so emptiness is not produced,
Right.
unlike.
That's why it's
phenomenon.
permanent. Right.
Okay.
There are only a few things that are considered permanent. Emptiness is one of them, because it's not produced. Uncompounded space is considered permanent. Uncompounded space is the absence of obstruction. There has to be an absence of obstruction for anything to be here. Otherwise, it'd be prevented from being there. This is really technical.
That's the cause.
No, it's no cause. It's just a condition.
Sorry, already.
It's an absence of something.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it, yeah.
But even things like uncompounded space have parts. There's the eastern part, there's the northern part, there's the southern part of uncompounded space. You can point to parts of space. There's the emptiness of this side of the cup, there's the emptiness of that side of the cup, there's an emptiness. So they're parts, but it's not produced. There's nothing that can produce the absence of inherent existence. They just are absent of inherent, that's how they can exist at all. And I get myself into this discussion. Okay.
Yeah, it's something that crosses your mind when you're meditating sometimes.
That's a good one.
Yeah, because
This is the
problem. Keeps you half an hour.
Wait a minute. Emptiness, I think it's permanent. I was like, so it's
Yeah. But it's not, but the trouble is, if you go there too far,
You're claiming on that.
Yeah,
you start to think that it's somehow this thing,
yeah.
right.
you know, and it's different from everything else because it's permanent. No, it's just a name given to this absence of inherent existence.
Just how you describe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's better to think of the absence of inherent existence, that we grasp at inherent existence. We grasp it as self, as inherently existent, and we need to refute that. That inherent existence is the object of negation, because it doesn't exist. You know. So a non-existent can't be impermanent, because it's not produced. It doesn't exist. Okay, why is this important? We have to look at the consequences. If things are dependent arising, that means it can only exist when all those causes and conditions are there. As soon as those causes and conditions are there, it will not exist. We have a tendency to grasp at things as if they're permanent when they're not. Like relationships. Like labels friend, enemy, stranger. So we need to so even though intellectually we've got that, we don't have any trouble with this, but the reality is we act as if things are permanent. We're shocked when things change. That's a sure clue that we're grasping at something that's permanent when they're not there anymore, and we're shocked by that. Oh, I'm sorry, I just got a job. I remember I used to travel through Atlanta all the time. I was living in North Carolina. My folks lived in New Orleans, and my younger brother was living in Atlanta, and it was really convenient because that was halfway there, so I could drive home, spend the night at his house, and go home, and it was really quite lovely. I really liked it. And then one day he decided to move. You know, I was like, oh, I guess I really can't, you know, hold on to this idea of always having a place to stay halfway to New Orleans, you know. But it's this, you know, you just kind of get this, you know, whenever, like if you break something and there's a part of you that's sort of like, how can that not be here? It just shows you that we're grasping at the appearance of permanent. The cup looks like it's here in every moment, doesn't it? I mean, it looks like it's just always here. Until it's destroyed. It's not here. Before it's produced, it's not here. But that's actually not true. It just appears that way to us. And the reason we don't have to really be creeped out is sometimes when you feel like this, you feel sort of like Pem and Children talks about groundlessness. There's nothing to hold on to, you know. Yes, that's true, but there never was. Nothing has changed, folks. It just never did exist that way. We just keep thinking it exists that way. And sometimes it's because they appear to, you know, it's because it appears that way to us. And then we go even further, you know. We make the object, the parts, the basis of a designation into this thing. We believe the label. And we think it's permanent. And it never was. So becoming familiar with reality as it is can help us suffer less. So the more we can get familiar with this, just moment to moment, the more that we can even just think of, you know, like every moment of our existence is past. You know, it's like, there's like you can really look at each breath, or the end of each, you know, out breath as a death. Because that's what happens. We're one in breath away from death. You know? There's going to be a point which we don't breathe back in. And if we think, but we know when that's going to be, won't be now. The older we get, the less we think that. But, you know, we still kind of think, not today, probably not tomorrow. It's ridiculous. The good news is, your mind just goes into the next thing. It's the grasping at, but this me, I don't want to let go of this me. I like this me, or I like this me that I've become. I don't like myself much. Previous me's, you know. This is where we suffer. This is clinging. Oh, it's got to be this partner. Yeah. Happiness only exists if I get the right partner, or I get the right job, the right car, or the right iPhone, or the right whatever. I mean, we just constantly are chasing after things that are constantly changing as if we can make them, you know, stay. And it's not true. It's just, and it's never been true. Okay. Understanding how things actually exist keeps us from clinging to these impossible imputations. This is how we can suffer less even in this life, when we haven't realized emptiness yet. If we can just really recognize impermanence. It's hard to imagine that there can come a time where the way things appear to us will not carry any weight. Between the time that a being realizes empty, has that path of seeing, experiences directly how things actually exist, and the time they become a Buddha, everything still appears as inherently existing. They just know it's not true. It's like us knowing intellectually the cup's not here constantly.
But at least you have that.
Hmm?
That helps. That's something.
If we hold it in mind, if we keep reminding ourselves that our eyes are fooling us. Because we want to go beyond the intellect. We need to experience this. And one way to do that is, thinking about loss, or thinking when we're holding on to something really tightly. This is why they recommend that you meditate on things like when somebody criticizes you, and to really think about what was that self that you were holding on? Shouldn't have said that about me. What does that me look like to you? Because that me never existed. Because think about it. Praise or criticism doesn't change who we are, does it? It's just whether somebody likes what we did or didn't like it. Doesn't change anything. But we think happiness is there, or suffering is there. When it doesn't change anything. Yeah.
It's like, you remember your first big breakup with someone, and it's like I'm never going to be happy again. I'm dying. I can't eat. And then, you get old,
6 weeks later.
Yeah, or by the third time that happens to you, if you use, remember things are impermanent, it's like, okay, it's not the first, not going to be the last probably.
Yep.
But if you don't hold on to that feeling of, because sometimes it'll be, you always think, I'm spiritual, I know everything's impermanent, but then you break up with your girlfriend, it's like, oh my God.
I'll never get over it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll never be happy again.
Never. Never. You can't conceive of it in that moment.
Right.
That's how we exaggerate the negative aspects of an event. This is what we do, and we don't need to. This is just this habituation to thinking that happiness is outside of us, that it's about having that right person, who contains that happiness, and that person's the right one for me. All of which is not true. All of it's a story we're making up. Because we can be happy. It's like when you have to sit there and think, okay, I was happy before I met this person. So it's possible for me to be happy without this person. It just doesn't feel like it right now. So, blah, blah, blah. But then we meet someone new, don't we? And then we do the same thing. Oh, I finally met the right person. Now, happiness is really possible.
Cling to them.
Oh, we haven't learned a thing. And it's not that there's something wrong with enjoying someone else's company, someone's body, and someone's thoughts. None of that is a problem. It's our clinging to it as if our happiness is in that other object. That's what's not true. It's just not true. And thinking that there is it's like you can't point to the same me twice. You can't point to the same partner twice either. Everything's changing all the time. Our happiness and suffering aren't out there. So we really want to look at our stories and what we're clinging to. And also having a really good sense of humor. You know,
Yeah.
so we can catch ourselves and go, oh, there I go again, clinging.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but this is the purpose, you know, so meditating, reflecting, being able to, you know, just letting yourself pause and go, okay. So that we can have those experiences, those aha moments. Make those the habit. So, because this is what we do. We add meaning on top of labels, right? So, the mashed potatoes, full of butter, you know, that is comfort food, you know. You feel better just thinking about having them when you get home, you know, something like this. So it becomes that way. Is that any quality of the mashed potatoes or the cinnamon toast or the, you know? But this is what we do. We start to equate. Having this means comfort. Having this means security. Having this means safety, none of which are true. This is why, like, the other night we were talking about Christopher Reeve. You know, here's this guy, you know, at the height of his sort of career, you know, good-looking guy, sportsman, all this kind of stuff, you know, married, has a little 2-year-old or some, you know, great life, you know, has success, and then, bam, his conditions end for that. You know? Because we're not that. There isn't this, oh, now I've made it. It doesn't exist. There is no, now I've made it. In any moment, we can lose everything we've had. And so the way we've trained our mind is going to really determine how we experience that next moment. And so if we put all our importance, all our little eggs into the, oh, I'm good looking, I have a job, you know, and I have money parts, you know, and I can, you know, I don't know, I'm a horseman, whatever. Well, then all your happiness has just gone away.
Then he raised all this money for spinal cord injury research, and it seems like his life took on another dimension.
Yeah, it was meaningful before, it was meaningful after, because of habit. You know, if you don't look at what's negative and look at what's positive, well, I have resources. You know, I can pay for full-time care. I can pay for that machine and the generator for that machine to keep me breathing. Does it change the fact that I know it just takes a power outage for me to die? No. Does it change the fact that I can't hug my child? No. Does it mean he's stuck there permanently? No. But those conditions changed. And, you know, we need to really internalize this knowledge so that we make the best use of every moment. So it's meaningful to us, or at least it's practicing in a direction we want to go. And we won't succeed. Well, you know, like you said, you know, oh, I know things are impermanent, but, you know, I mean, we're going to have those moments. But we can at least shorten them. Where we can kind of go, yeah, right, that's not true. Okay, yes, I feel bad today, but it's not going to be permanent.
Or like my most recent breakup, you know, after the 3, you know, as I got older, I had that moment of like, okay, see, you're having that clinging of like, oh no, it's like, you stupid idiot, come on. So it didn't last as long as suffering, because I didn't cling to that.
Because the clinging itself is the suffering.
Right.
You know, it's this, because we're clinging at something that doesn't exist. So there's nothing there to give you anything. You know, that's the deal. You know, and if we hold, oh, but if I can't have that perfect relationship, or I can't have, I don't know, whatever, you know, you're missing the amazing experience of existing. Thinking that, oh, I'm all alone here. Are you kidding? You're sharing the planet with 7 billion other people. You know, not to mention insects. It's just not true. You are not alone. You know, not only that, you're not the only one who feels this way. That, you know, so at the very least, you can have compassion for yourself and compassion for all the other sentient beings who are feeling the same way in this moment. Because this is the truth of suffering and samsara. But the more we can throw our hearts open and recognize that what we're chasing is never going to be a source of happiness, the more opportunities we'll have to experience meaningful actions and meaningful moments. And eventually they'll add up, you know, to methods to get out of this mess. Because this mess only exists through our ignorance. So the horror stories we, you know, can tell each other and the truths and all that, you know, they only exist because of our ignorance. It's totally unnecessary. It's just it's going to keep arising because we keep creating the cause for them to arise. So it's really apt to, you know, I always feel like it really is a hopeful story. Let's hope it's not just a story. Okay. All right. Our little review. First things first, we need to achieve a good rebirth because we need a succession of those to get liberated from samsara. Okay? How do you achieve a good rebirth? You need to stay motivated by reflecting on impermanence, reflecting on karma, really understanding cause and effect. You need to make a habit of trying to think positive thoughts. That doesn't mean happy thoughts. It just means thoughts that are meaningful and are not clinging at, you know, things that don't exist. Avoid the causes for unhappy rebirth, all the negative actions of body, speech, and mind. Purify past actions. Anything that you're habituated into this life, you've been doing it a while.
What are the 4 opponent powers?
That's another course.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need to, you know, we need to acknowledge the harm we've done to others. And try to use that as a motivation to catch ourselves before we do it again. Finally figure out that samsara is just, you know, not good enough. Then you need to achieve liberation. Because liberation is a state free of suffering. And its cause is ignorance. So we have to realize emptiness. We have to know the absence of inherent existence. How to achieve that? Again, you have to stay motivated. Reflect on the faults of cyclic existence. Reflect on what binds us to cyclic existence. Really understanding the 12 links. Really understanding craving, grasping, and becoming. That's what happens. Craving, grasping, and then becoming. Generate renunciation, which just means you're giving up suffering. You know, really understanding samsara's suffering, you're ready to let go of that. Then you need to train in ethics, because that's what helps you get those rebirths, and concentration, which is what you absolutely must have in order to realize emptiness, develop the wisdom that understands how things exist, and then you're liberated from samsara. You're worried about others? Well, then you need to achieve Buddhahood. You know? Because you need, in order to help every single sentient being, you need no ignorance at all. So you need an omniscient mind. So again, you need to stay motivated. I can't emphasize motivation enough. So you reflect on the faults of self-centeredness, reflect on the benefits of cherishing others. You generate the mind of bodhicitta. You train in the 6 perfections. you generate the realization of emptiness, and then finally you train in Vajrayana, which creates the cause for the form body of a Buddha. Piece of cake, right? Everybody ready? So, notice this word,
Patience.
patience. What does patience mean?
Ability to withstand discomfort, suffering.
That arises in the mind without the wish to retaliate. Because you'll need that for joyous effort. Because after all, you're trying to benefit that person who's harming you. Anyway. All right, questions? Okay.
So basically, this was the culmination of the path.
Yeah,
tonight.
it's the whole path.
And those last slides were,
There were a review of the different, what you need to do based on the different goals. So if your goal is to have a good rebirth, then you have to figure out what creates the cause for a good rebirth, and then you have to act on that, you know. And we need a series of those. So we can't skip any of the steps, whether, you know. We might have started on this Mahayana path that wants to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but that doesn't mean we don't need a good rebirth to do that, you know. So even though you can become enlightened in one lifetime, you have to create the cause for that. And that takes a series of good lives, you know, where you accumulate lots of merit, you don't accumulate a lot of negative seeds. And that you've developed some wisdom about what, you know, what you're doing. Yeah.
Is it, so let's say you're giving to, you know, you're doing charity, you're trying to build this merit. Is it okay to think like, or you know, you're praying, or you're, you know, before you meditate, like please remove the suffering and the obstacles in my life.
Yep.
So that eventually I can awaken and stay here to help everyone else awaken. So it's like, because personally,
We have to accomplish our own welfare first.
Okay, so I feel that it's okay to do that.
Yeah, but you really always want to combine it with the wish to benefit others.
Just end it at always. At
Always
the end.
do that,
For
yeah.
everyone else. Eventually, for everyone else.
Don't even put eventually in there. Maybe you've created all the causes to become enlightened in this life, and you just have obstacles to knowing that. So you don't even want to make it eventually.
So it's not selfish to go, please remove the suffering in my own life.
If you stop there, it's selfish.
Right.
Especially if you're just focused on this life.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Dharma. You know, whatever we do that's for the purpose of this life alone isn't Dharma. That's just self-centeredness. You know, that's not a strong enough motivation to help you in the future. So it's really about, yes, it's fine to say, but you want to connect the dots. You want to be able to say, in order for me to even care about other sentient beings,
Right.
you know, I need help understanding, you know, that my sense of separateness is not real, that, you know, all this stuff, you know. So we want to remove our obstacles to understanding that cherishing others is the method. You know. But yeah, we can dedicate all of our efforts for as many things as we like. As many things we have time to fit in the dedication. You know. But we always want to have that big view that just says, you know, and not just for me, I want it to benefit others. You know, because, you know, let's face it, our desire for good qualities of being kind and being patient, you know, involves others. You know, who cares if we're kind if there are no other people around?
You know, one of the interesting things that I've read about imaging in neuroscience is that when people think of others, it's in a certain place of the
Yep.
brain. When people think of themselves, it's in a certain place
Yep.
of But when people think of their future selves, it's actually in the place where they think of others. So for me, that means that when you are cherishing others, you're also cherishing your future self.
Of course, because that's where happiness is.
Yeah.
See, this is what's interesting, you know, is that, you know, and we can train the mind in these things. That's what's also interesting. You know, so you can take, if you take an 8-week course in mindfulness, then what activates in your mind will change. You know, if you practice thinking about compassion, what activates in your brain changes. You know, it's really fascinating. So it's not that, you know, it's not that the brain is dictating it, you're dictating what happens in your brain. You know? And it's just practice. So it's really fascinating. I tried to bring a video of that, but couldn't make it work.
I know, because I went back at Brewer, right? Brewer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or Gluter.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, okay, so now we can now dedicate all our efforts, you know, this whole course. But the fact that we weren't alone trying to spend our time thinking about things from a different perspective. This is really valuable work, and I say it every time because it really is valuable work. We spend most of our time frittering away our lives, you know. We spend it, you know, taking care of very basic needs like showering and eating and, you know, or watching TV, you know. It's, you know, we really do just spend a lot of time that's not particularly meaningful, but we can make it meaningful. And studying and thinking about the teachings and looking at these things in different ways is how we'll be able to make those other times meaningful. So that we start thinking about, oh, I'm doing this, you know, I'm getting in my car, not because I just want to go for a joyride, and I'm thinking about where I'm going to go so that I don't just waste gas, because I care about the planet, I care about people, and I want to be a part of helping, not, you know, not indifferent, you know, all those ways. That's all training from thinking about things differently. So we want to be happy about that. Yay, pat ourselves. Feel good about ourselves, you know, we did good. And then we want to just make sure we dedicate it to ripen to benefit others. Until there's no suffering sentient being left in samsara. That would be very nice. No suffering. Can you imagine how nice that would be? No worries, no fear. Bliss is easier than you think. Anyway, all right, next week. Next week?
Yes, this mind.
Mind and its potential. So we talk about how the Buddhist, you know, the Tibetan Buddhism looks at the mind, you know, because that helps us be more precise when we're looking, you know, we're observing our thoughts to really understand how it's working together, or how our thinking and what its results will be. So, okay?
And then some.